Welcome to Deep Work Out Loud, the thinking that fuels our life, our work, and our leadership. I'm Julie Harris-Oliver. This is the podcast where I sit with another coach or another professional and we do some work around a single concept, a piece of inspiration, a topic that we're thinking about that's coming up in coaching. And if we're really lucky while we're talking about it, we might demonstrate what coaching might look and feel like, but we'll see how this goes. This whole thing is an experiment. And with any luck, you will leave with something that you can apply and use in your work or your life or both. Today, I'm here with Jennifer Tankersley. Jennifer is an executive coach, leadership advisor, and lifelong learner devoted to understanding what enables exceptional leadership in complex environments. With decades of experience working at the intersection of strategy, transformation, and human development, she partners with leaders and teams to expand their capacity to lead with clarity, confidence, and meaningful impact. Known for her ability to connect ideas across disciplines, Jennifer brings together insights from adult development, leadership theory, neuroscience, embodied awareness, and systems thinking to illuminate what it truly means to be human in positions of responsibility. Her integrative approach shaped both her coaching practice and her upcoming book to be released in early 2027. I hope you will come back and talk about that, where she weaves diverse fields into a coherent framework for leading with greater awareness, resiliency, and possibility. At the heart of Jennifer's work is the belief that leadership becomes more powerful when it becomes more human. When leaders deepen their understanding of themselves, the people they lead, and the systems they shape, they create the conditions for stronger performance, wiser decisions, and more conscious, sustainable change. She lives in San Diego, California, because she is very lucky. And she's the proud mother of 3 exceptional humans. Hello, Jennifer.
Why, hello, Julie.
It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation. It's really a delight.
So tell us what brought you to this work.
To coaching, I assume you mean by that. Yeah, yeah. I was sitting with that question, and it was a pretty windy path. I probably, I could not have guessed it, but it probably was inevitable. Meaning, there were looking back, a lot of sort of trailheads along the way that I can see now were leading me here. But professionally, much of my career was spent in consulting, management consulting, really focused on strategy, operations, very data focused.
Yeah.
But looking back, I was always gravitating to the human aspect of the work that we were doing. I'm fascinated by humans.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are just delightful. And so, in the midst of strategy, operations, change, I would often find myself one-on-one in conversation with leaders, asking them questions like, what is it we're trying to do here? In service of what? How are we going to do it? Who do you or how do you need to show up in order to make this happen? And I found those conversations incredibly fulfilling, impactful. But it wasn't until I started working with my own coach that I got clarity around, oh, wait, this is something. I actually might be good at it. And I could probably learn some skills. And so it was around that time that I found the Hudson Institute.
It's always funny when people talk about coming to coaching, and it's always like connecting the dots backwards, right? It's like, obviously I'm here, but the path is so clear when you look backwards.
Yeah, for sure.
So what were you thinking about for us to unpack today?
Well, I think we got here because of something I had posted on LinkedIn. And then you sent a really lovely note saying that it had resonated for you, which really meant a lot to me. And it is a conversation that I'm in with clients, but I think it captures a lot of aspects of what leaders are struggling with. So maybe we start there.
Yeah, for sure. It struck me because I'm also in those conversations with leaders, and you were able to articulate it in such a way that was like, yes, that is the thing.
Shall we tell people what it's about?
Yeah. So what is the thing? Let's just talk about it for half an hour and never name it.
We'll let them guess. Um, yeah. So I actually started this article, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And then life got busy and I stuck it into a folder and I pulled it back up, I don't know, a couple of months ago. And I was like, hold on a second. Kind of that like looking in hindsight.
Yeah.
I was touching on something that I'm seeing a lot, continue to see a lot of with my clients, maybe seeing more of with my clients. And it's actually connected to a lot of things that I'm studying, writing about in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
So the article really was born out of a conversation I had with a client who was really feeling, I think, overwhelmed, burnt out, frustrated, because she didn't feel like she was creating value. She was questioning herself. And I was really struck by that because it didn't add up for me.
Right.
It just didn't add up. So the article is really around why senior leaders or leaders in general often feel like they're not doing enough, right? That enoughness. And some ideas about what might really be going on.
Mm-hmm. It's that feeling of, I've been busy all day long. I've been talking to people constantly and I haven't gotten anything done. Like I didn't check a single thing off my list.
And that's literally how the conversation started.
Yeah.
And she was on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. And we had gotten onto a call at the end of her day. And she opened with this like, oh my God, I got nothing done today. And I was like, really?
Really?
Sure. What you been doing? And she proceeded to list off, there's really what sounded like important and impactful conversations, considerations, reflections, but she hadn't crossed anything off of this list that she'd become very attached to.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this both this cognitive sort of disconnect. Like, is the list in charge, or like, what is it you're really here to do? And we started to attack that. But there was also what I would describe as sort of a wiring piece, a full body felt sense. So there's the cognitive piece, right? Like I didn't do these things, do being the word. And, but there was also this, like this overwhelmed felt sense of, I don't sense that feeling of accomplishment, of significance that I want to feel. And they were related, but it was creating a sort of a vibration in her that felt really kind of outdated to what the organization and what her leadership was asking of her.
Yeah. So how did you start to define that? Because I've had the same conversation. My husband just got a promotion at a much bigger job. And he said the same thing. I'm so busy all day long, I can never get to my work. I'm like, dude, your work has changed. This is now your work.
Yeah.
So how did you start to define that together?
Well, in hindsight, it's kind of funny. So I went to mix. And maybe my kids at the time were, I don't know, maybe I was helping with like some arithmetic. But I all of a sudden saw this as sort of what's that?
Did you say math?
Yeah, I was like, math. What is
I heard you went to mass. I was like, oh.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes that can help. But in this situation, I went to arithmetic.
Okay. Got it. Math.
Yes. A picture came to my mind of those value functions.
Mm-hmm.
X is a function of A, B, and C, right?
What's the equation?
What's the equation? Because we were talking about her value, and it's like we didn't quite have the equation figured out. And value is a function of what? And so we started to like break it down. Because she was really indexing on the W, which I call the big W, the work that she did, the things that she could tangibly see an outcome. Yep, exactly. They could check it off the list.
Yeah.
I
print a piece of paper.
I did that, right?
Yeah.
Write it down.
Here's my deck.
Here's so that is a component of how value could be created in the workplace. But we started to say, okay, so but what else, right? And what else now? And so we started to unpack what she was doing in all of those calls, right? And so some of it, she was what I called the E, which was she was enabling work to get done. She was showing up and creating the conditions. She was coaching people. She was
clearing obstacles.
She was helping to define and get clarity, right? And then we were like, okay, so what else were you doing? Well, she was sort of a connector as a big global company, and she was sort of leading some really important initiatives. So she was getting some data in, she was passing some, so she was sort of this flow of information that was coming through her. So we put I as one of the factors. And then there was a space of like coming to the so what's of it. And a lot of her job was requiring more of her holding space for what was it that really needed to happen? What were those connections? How did that information apply to her, and how might she support that? So that was another one. And then when I went back to revisit the equation and the article, I realized so much of what I've been doing, and so much of what I think is required to create value from leadership, is this piece around what I'm calling, which is self-leadership. This piece around, do you have the spaciousness to kind of make sure that the greatest tool you have access to is is showing up with clarity, with openness, with intentionality. So I added that. So I'm sure there's probably other components, but those seem to be the 5 major components that the leaders I work with are often sort of, pulling on to create value. The work that they do, the work they enable others to do, the information or the learning that they have or that they're helping to create, the reflection, the so what, the pause and consideration, and then the self-leadership.
And the regulation.
Yeah. And the regulation that's really required right now.
It's the whole thing. It's not the whole thing. It's all these parts, but it's big. It's big. And so you also use that phrase in your article that we use in coaching anyway, which is making the invisible visible. But when you're talking about those kind of intangible things that take up so much of a leader's time, how are you making those things visible?
You mean those different variables? Are we making those? Yeah. So one of the things, at the simplest level, I think what we do as coaches is help our leaders show up in purpose and on purpose, right?
Say that
Getting
again.
clearer in purpose and on purpose.
Yes.
Right? So getting clear on what is it I'm here to do. And that could be big P purpose, but it could be like in this moment, in this meeting, what is it I'm here to do? And then how do I need to show up in service of that? Right? And so some of the ways that we make those components, those value drivers visible is we take stock of what is it you're here to do? What is this moment, right? What is it asking of you? Back to those early conversations I used to have with leaders when we were talking about implementing a new strategy, creating some change. What is your part of that? What is the thing that you uniquely do to like sort of pull the lever to make this happen? And what can you draw upon to do that? And when we start to really look at that, what are the things that you're uniquely able to do at an enterprise level? See a lot of the dots, right? Take those in, make sense of them, create the conditions for people to do good work, provide the clarity for them, right? And create the conditions within yourself to show up in service of that.
And someone else can probably make the deck.
Always like, it is a really helpful question. Could somebody else do it?
Someone else, yeah. Are you distracting yourself from something doing that deck?
Yeah.
And it's when you say what do you uniquely bring to this? And I would add, and also, and maybe it's the same thing. What is the thing that only you can do?
Yeah. I think that's what we're trying to get at, right?
And so this speaks to me of a certain level of maturity to even get to the point of, even in just the micro, what do I bring to this meeting? What is my purpose here in this meeting? Is such a different perspective than how am I going to do in this meeting?
Yeah.
What am I going to say? Am I going to be smart? But what am I here to do in this meeting? The setting aside of the ego to be in service of what needs to happen.
Yeah, I think there is a sort of a vertical development or maturity to be able to anchor on sort of that in which I'm here to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
What am I in service of? It's bigger than my own protection, my own sense of self. But I think it also speaks to, there's a level of groundedness, a level of enough safety, enough sort of rootedness within ourselves in order to do that. Because even some of the most mature leaders I know today are finding themselves in some pretty reactive patterns because of the amount of sort of overwhelm, the pace, the strain that we fall back into our reactive strategies, right? And so it takes both a level of sort of inner knowing that I am enough, right? And I am here in service of something bigger than my own self-protection, but also an embodied enough clarity, enough safety, enough groundedness to be able to catch ourselves going into patterns of sort of self-protection or ego, to notice when we are reacting versus choosing, to notice when we are opening up to what is actually here, what is really here, and creating the conditions for that co-regulation for others to do the same.
The word safety there, I think, is doing a lot of work. Because I still hear from very high level leaders, I'm still afraid of getting fired, like irrationally so, right?
Yeah.
And so to be able to sit in whatever the condition is in a really open, centered, grounded way, what methods do you use for that?
One, I think starting with some compassion and honoring that we are of our humanness. Like, we are designed brilliantly for survival, which means that our brains and our bodies were magnificently developed to constantly be attuning to, am I safe enough or not? So that's our human design, right? It is our species design. And so some compassion that, whether we're aware of it or not, we are scanning for that all of the time.
For sure.
And the fact of the matter is, we live and work in environments that are sending all sorts of cues that we're probably not very safe. And so we have to be really conscious of, what is it that we can anchor in that feels safe enough? What of that sense of threat is real versus imagined? Our bodies cannot tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger charging at us and a story that we're not good enough and people are just going to figure it out one day. They both feel overwhelming and threatening. And so we have to be working with, this is the more that we know ourselves, know what our patterns are and can find ways through the breath, through movement, through embodiment, through the stories we tell ourselves to find enough, because nobody expects leadership to be easy, right? But we cannot be operating in a sustained level of threat, a felt sense of threat all the time and show up at our best. We just can't. So we have to figure out ways to let our body settle, right? And our mind settle so that we can restore and come back for the hard work. How are you experiencing that, either for yourself or with your clients?
I'm seeing it a lot with clients. There's one right now I'm thinking about whose job is very much that equation you laid out. And yet her boss still wants to see the checklist. And so I actually sent her your article.
Oh, no.
And so now we're talking about if she can really internalize that equation for herself, and there may also be some managing up that needs to happen.
For sure.
So that's the challenge at the moment of figuring out how to communicate that to a leader who seems to be very focused on everybody's checklists.
Yeah. And do you think she and her leader have alignment around what her role is and sort of the charter or the purpose of that role?
No, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, I often find that those conversations, like starting there, right? What do we think she's here to do? And it can be a co-creation. I used to use a process called role chartering, where I'd have a leader take a first stab at what's your job title? What do you think that actually means? Not as a job description, but as a sort of living, breathing purpose. What is it that, with that title, what is it that you are here to do? And take a first stab at that. And then take it to their manager and say, okay, where do we see this the same? Where do we see it differently? Right? Like, I often find, I don't know about you, but coming out of coaching conversations, I'm often like, so who do you actually need to be talking to? Right? What is the conversation that isn't happening? And that might help the situation, because they're systems. They're not leading alone, right? But often starting with that question of what is it that this role is doing, and even looking at it in the context of the broader system relative to other people. What is it that you own? What is it you share, right? What does that look like? What does it require in terms of those competencies or those variables in order to deliver on that? And so having a framework to have a really thoughtful conversation around that alignment not only provides sort of the clarity in the North Star, but also creates a sort of felt sense of safety, right? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're on the same page here.
Because otherwise it's crazy making.
It's crazy. And so much. I feel like clarity. In a world of a lot of uncertainty. And I think we used to think about clarity of like, I can see the path and I can see the answer, and let's go do that. In the uncertainty, in the complexity, in the chaos in which many leaders are leading, that external clarity, the destination, and how we're going to get there, trying to anchor on that actually might be futile in many situations. But clarity around what is it we're trying to do? What is my part? What is your part? How do we know when it's working? How do we know when it's not? How are we going to get back aligned with each other when it feels off? That level of clarity, I think, can create a felt sense of safe enough. I think of the I. It's like getting the the eye in the middle of the storm, right? In the middle of, right? Like that stillness, that quiet, that clarity. And it requires a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it requires grounded conversation, listening and pausing and hearing one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would help both of them.
Mm. Mm. I think the other piece that's coming up when you say that, and specifically about a leader who's like, I want people check, 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 check. Sometimes when I talk about this concept of getting clear on what value, I bring back that, I think it's called the Eisenhower matrix,
Mm-hmm.
which is that 2x2, like spending time on what's important, urgent, important. And I think it's a really helpful, simple tool.
Yeah,
in
totally.
XBCG, we love our 2x2s. But unless we have ways of defining what those mean and getting clear on those, it can be really confusing. So when you say, okay, let's graph out what are the things that are most important, if you don't have clarity on your value proposition, it's really hard to answer that question. So this first article was really about how do we get enough clarity around the value, how you're creating value, so that we can determine what's most important.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of that 2x2 is the urgency. And I don't know what you're experiencing with your clients, but I'm experiencing clients who are literally opening up like everything's really urgent right now. And I'm like, really?
Is it?
Again, really? Everything? So I was thinking about what actually makes something urgent. And there's this sort of unconscious narrative. Urgency is like, I must do or else,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or else. And right now, and sometimes there is a real cost to that or else, right? There is a deadline and we lose the opportunity. Or, there's something will not work if it doesn't come together by this point, or there's some danger, if we don't get this information out in time. There are some significant or else's.
I wonder if a lot of times the or else is, or else I can't check it off my list.
Huge.
Yeah.
Right. And if we go back to that idea of reactivity, when we are triggered, we are moving into typically kind of a fight or flight. Those have action. They have an energy of action. And so our bodies are like, I'm in fight or I need action.
Make this feeling stop. What's going to take?
Stop. And we have been very programmed that to-do list. And we know that there's neurochemicals that kind of flood our system when we get that action has an outcome that feels good, that help calm that feeling of urgency. So yeah, go ahead.
I'm just thinking about how much the world has done this to us. Like I keep thinking because yes, I'm old. I am not that old. My first job was transcribing letters for a president of a company, because it was really before everyone's writing up their own emails and you're sending, 200 a day. If we sent out 7 letters in a day, that was a really full day.
Wow.
And so to look at the exponential data, pace, things you have to accomplish in a day, like, yes, we've all been running on adrenaline and dopamine at such a different pace than we even did earlier in our careers.
Yeah.
And so once I think it's related, right? You're used to this. So then to slow down again, really uncomfortable.
For sure. I think that's such a beautiful visual image of what we're talking about, right? And how much of that is because it truly is required, that 200 emails are now required versus 7? Or is it culture? Is it pattern? Or is it sort of a reactivity, right? So one of the things I've been really thinking about, or I think I'm going to write about next, is how do we really discern where is the urgency coming from? Is it a true external or else that has significant consequences and we need to respond to that? Or is it an internal frequency or even a shared frequency of, um, of urgency, more of a reactive pattern than an actual requirement, an actual need? And I think beginning to attune to that, getting quieter to it creating enough space, like slowing down before we speed up.
Yeah, having taking the time to even discern that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was meeting with a client that I see in person, and her assistant was saying something to me about, oh, yeah, we've been just running around. And she said, everything's urgent. And I kind of gave her a little, I said, yeah, is it? And she said, no, it's not. If I create a little pause or if I like it's, but it feels really urgent.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's really important information. What do we do with that?
I was talking on a podcast a couple weeks ago with Dr. Michael Hine, who talks about leaders having to take the time to recover in the same way that elite athletes do.
Exactly.
And the recovery is in the rest. It's not in the grind.
Yeah. We talk about resiliency is our ability to push through, right? But or endure, right? And just so strong, right?
Right.
And
I have a lot of stamina.
Right. And it's just not sustainable, at least not in a way that brings forth our highest intelligence or highest capabilities, right?
And not anymore.
No.
Like maybe 20 years ago, you could push through because it wasn't as much to push through.
Yeah. Well, maybe there were natural periods of restoration, right? But with the 24/7, right? And even the return of work, we got news, we've got, right? There's just a lot. But our bodies, there's this amazing video of a polar bear that is sort of being followed. Have you seen this one? It's being followed by a helicopter. They're doing, some animal research. And they're trying to tag him for research. And so and he's running because he feels the chase. And they shoot him with a dart to tranquilize him so they can tag him. It was a organization that was in service of the animals, not against.
Yeah.
But regardless, it felt dangerous to the polar bear.
Sure.
And so there's this person who describes what's happened. So they come up, the polar bear's, in this kind of frozen state. But as they're starting to wake up from the sedation, you can see the breath changing and they start to shake. And basically what they're doing is they're shaking off all of that activation that they felt before they were sedated. And they're shaking it off. And as they shake, they begin to yawn. And then they have a big sigh. And then their breath comes back to normal. And it's a beautiful demonstration of what our nervous systems are designed to naturally do. But we as humans, have taught ourselves to sort of control ourselves and just push through and not do that. And so like athletes know it's so acute. They can see that their bodies can't do that. For leaders, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Because
you don't get better
at how to restore.
Yeah. You don't get better through the grind.
Yeah. And the world today requires the best of what we have to offer, right? Our human intelligence to really sense into, to feel into, to see what is emerging, because it's not predictable, right? We've never been here before. So we have to be grounded enough and resourced enough to pause, pay attention, make sense of, and then determine right action. And that requires clarity, back to this clarity of what it is we're here to do, and on purpose and in purpose, right? On purpose and the conditions to be able to do it.
It's a lot of work.
It's And that's the job, I think, of coaches,
Yeah.
is we invite a pause for that work. I often say, my clients come in like they've been holding their breath since we spoke last, and they exhale, right? And we settle, and then we go, okay, what's really here? What's most important? And learning to do that outside of coaching as well, right? It needs to be part of a leadership practice, I think, because it has to happen more than once every 2 weeks or whatever that cadence might be.
Yeah. It's a big job.
Yeah.
It's a big job. What, just being mindful of the time, what would you kind of leave us with?
Sure. As coaches, I would leave us with sort of the invitation. One, the work starts with us. Getting clear on what it is we are here to do for our clients, and getting clear on what is our system, how is our system, and how do we, self as coach, how do we need to show up to create those conditions for our clients to do the work? And that takes a level of clarity, a level of intentionality, a level of sort of self-care. And when we do it for ourselves, I think we create the conditions and we inspire the leaders we work with to do the same for themselves. And I often say, I wish I knew when I was leading, teams and organizations. I wish I knew then what I know now as a coach. Like, it was not a nice to have to create pause, to create safety, to tend to myself, to get that clarity. It is actually my job. And it became very clear as a coach, in order to be a transformational coach, you have to do that. But the same is true later.
And that is the point. That is the job.
Yeah.
That is the job.
I often tell my clients, like, let's pull out your job description. And if you had to add a bullet of like, those, like the client or this person must be able to.
Yeah.
What's not there that needs to be there? Right.
Like, let's say invisible given.
This.
Yeah. I remember when I had a big job, running around and not pausing ever, not processing anything until I laid my head down to go to sleep. And then I was up for hours just processing my day.
For really awful sleep.
Yeah, really terrible sleep. And then get up the next day and do it again. Yeah, I wish I knew then what I know now.
Yeah.
Jennifer, thank you so much for doing this. I continue to learn so much from you every time I talk to you or see you or any of those things.
Thank you.
And I will link to the article in the show notes, and I share your article from your website. But how else can people find you?
LinkedIn. And I don't really have a social media presence outside of that. So LinkedIn, on my website, and hopefully coming in Q1, we'll be having some announcements about a book.
I'm excited about that. What's the name of your website?
The Tankersley Group.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Thank you for this. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate the invitation, and it means a lot that article resonated for you and for your client.
We need to continue to share it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for saying yes.
You are so welcome.
This has been Deep Work Out Loud. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. I'd like to thank Jennifer Tankersley for joining the podcast. If any of this resonates with you, please subscribe, leave a review at all the podcast places, and please share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to work with me, you can find me at julieharrisoliver.com. And let me leave you with this invitation. What is it you are being asked to do in this moment? What is your piece to create? And how do you need to show up in service of that? What levers might you pull? Take this on as an experiment. Try some things. Think about it. Report back. Thanks for listening. See you next time.